Hello students, myself Poonam Rajguru from Annasaheb Awate College, Manchar from IT department. In today's lecture, I am going to explain the concept of cascading style sheet. This concept is used in HTML programming. In this lecture, we have studied about how how CSS is implemented in HTML programming, how it works in HTML programming, which are the different types of CSS and what are the selectors are used in CSS. Let's see. Uh, First, understand the concept of CSS. Everyone know about the HTML programming. HTML is a markup language and it is used to create different web pages. In HTML programming, we can use different tags. We can use different tags for styling your web page or formatting your web page. See, now we can see the concept of CSS. First, the CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. The CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. The CSS is a styling language. CSS is a styling language which is used to describe or formatting and looking the web page. CSS is a styling language which is used to describe the formatting and looking of your web document. CSS is also uh, CSS is a mechanism to adding style in your web documents. For example, you can use fonts, colors or spacing in your web page. CSS is a CSS it is used to create web pages and make that web pages more attractive using different tags or different selectors like fonts, colors, spacing, alignment, background images, or you can insert any images with the videos or audios. This is your CSS. But using HTML you can create different web pages and adding different tags in it and making that web pages more attractive. CSS also used to create web pages and making that web pages more attractive. Here one question is arrived, then why CSS is needed in HTML programming? Why CSS is important in your HTML programming? Let's see one example. Using that example, we can understand how CSS is useful in HTML. Let's see. Suppose we can create three HTML files. Suppose we can create three HTML files, that is HTML1, then HTML2, then HTML3. We can create three HTML files, HTML1, HTML2 and HTML3. For styling that three files, we can add tags. For styling these files HTML1, HTML2 and HTML3, we can add tags, but in this we can add these tags each time in every file. We can add this tag each time in every files. Okay, but instead of that we can add CSS in HTML. We can add style definition. At one time. We can add style definition at one time in HTML file, and this style definition is affects to all files. This style definition affects to all HTML files. That means Using CSS, we can add one style definition at one time, and this style definition is affects to all HTML file instead of using multiple time tags in your HTML file. That's why CSS is most important in HTML file. Then we can see some advantages. Some advantages. The advantages of CSS. These advantages helps to know why CSS is important. In previous example, we can see that instead of multiple tags, we can use only one style definition. Due to this, you can save your work. Due to this, you can save your work. That means CSS saves lots of work. CSS saves lots of work. Then the size of web page is decreased. The size of web pages or your web project is decreases. That's why your page loading done faster. Your page loading done faster. Then third one is a easy maintenance, and last is a compatible with multiple devices. If you can create your web project on your personal computers or any mobile devices, that means using CSS web project can run on any other devices. These are the some advantages of CSS. That is, CSS saves lots of work. It is page loading faster, easy maintenance, and compatible with multiple devices. These advantages helps to know how CSS is important in HTML file. Then next we can see the CSS syntax. The CSS syntax. The CSS rule consists of selector and declaration block. The CSS syntax consists of selector and declaration block. Here see the format of CSS syntax. First we can see the H1. H1 is a selector. Then in curly bracket show the declaration block. First is the H1. It is a selector, and in curly bracket we can show the declaration block. In declaration block again see the property and values. Again see the property and value. In this structure we can see the selector is a H1. That means the selector you can write any tags. You can write selector as a any tags like H1, H2 or P tag. Like that tags you can use as a selector. Then in a declaration block you can write the property and value. In a declaration block you can write a property and value. The main important things in that the property and value is separated by the colon. The property and value is separated by the colon. In curly bracket you can write property, then colon, then value, again semicolon, again property, again colon, then value, again semicolon, and curly bracket close. Let's see some example. In this example you can see the example P. In curly bracket we can write color colon red, then semicolon, then again text align, then colon, center, semicolon, and curly bracket close. You can see this example. In this example the P show as a selector. P work as a selector. You can write any tags. You can write any tags. Instead of P you can use H1, H2, etc. Here in this example P work as a selector. In curly bracket this is your declaration block. This is your declaration block. Color colon red semicolon curly bracket close. This is your declaration block. In this declaration block color is your property. Color is your property and red is value of that property. Red is a value of that property, and your property and value is separated by the colon. Your property and value is separated by the colon. Understand? Then we can again see the text align is also property. Then center it is a value, and the properties and value is separated by the colon. Okay. Then next we can see the types of CSS. Next, we can see the types of CSS. That means in which way we can insert CSS in your HTML pages. The internal CSS, inline CSS and external CSS. These are the types of your CSS. Using these three ways we can insert CSS in your HTML pages. Okay. Then first is a internal CSS. First is your internal CSS. The internal CSS is used to apply CSS on single page. The internal CSS is used to apply CSS on single page or single document. In internal CSS, we can use a style element. In internal CSS, we can use a style element. This style element is used in head section. Most important things in internal CSS, we can use style element in your head section. Here see the example of internal CSS. In this example, we can write a style definition. We can use a selector H1. This is your declaration block. You can use a H1. You want to style this H1 selector. That's why you can use this H1. H1 selector here you can write in H1. After that you can write a declaration block in a style tag. You can use the style definition in your style tag, and this style tag used in your head section. See, your style tag is written in your head section. In internal CSS, the most important thing this is you can use the style tag or style elements in your head section, and internal CSS is used to apply CSS on a single page or a single document. This is your internal CSS. Then next we can see the inline CSS. Then in inline CSS, the inline CSS is used to apply CSS on single element or a single line. In inline CSS, the CSS is applied to single line or single element. Here see the example. In body section, we can write a P, then style element. You can write a style definition and you can write your sentence, then tag is close. This is a simple inline CSS. This is your simple inline CSS. In inline CSS, you can write in body section single element, that is a P, then style, then write in your style definition and tag is close. This is your inline CSS. I am saying again, inline CSS is applied when CSS is applied on single line or single element. Okay. Then next we can see the external CSS. The external CSS is used when you want to change the multiple pages. The external CSS is used when you want to change the multiple pages. It changes the look of the entire website by changing just one file. In external CSS, you can change the multiple files using one file. That's why in external CSS you can use a link tag in head section. For external CSS you can use link tag for linking purpose. In external CSS you can create two files. One is a HTML file and another is a CSS file. For joining or for connecting that two files you can use a link tag. Okay. The first file is saved with .html extension and the another file is saved with .css file. For joining that two files you can use the link tag in external CSS. Okay. Then next we can see the different selectors. There are different selectors are used in CSS. For example, the ID selector, the class selector, then universal selector and grouping selector. Let's see the first, the ID selector. The ID selector is a unique selector. The ID selector, ID means is a unique. ID is a unique element. The ID selector means it is a unique element. The most important thing in ID selector, the ID selector is written with the hash character. The ID selector is written with the hash character. It is most important symbol in ID selector. The ID selector is written with the hash symbol. Then the next is your class selector. The class selector is used when you want to change a group of elements. The class selector is used when you want to change a group of elements within your pages. Again, the most important thing in class selector, the class selector written with the period symbol. You can see here the period symbol. Class selector written with the period symbol. The class selector is used when you want to change a group of elements in your web page, and the class selector written with the period symbol. The class selector written with the period symbol. Here you can see the ID selector is written with the hash character and the class selector written with the period symbol. Here you can see the symbol of hash character and here you can see the symbol of period character. Okay. Then next is a universal selector. Next is a universal selector. The universal selector is used to select all the elements on the page. The universal selector is used to select all the elements on the page, and the universal selector is used to wildcard character. The universal selector is used to wildcard character. Here you can see the symbol of wildcard character. Then last is a group selector. Last is your group selector. The group selector is used to select the all the elements with the same style. The group selector is used to select all the elements with the same styles, and the commas are used in group selector for grouping. For grouping purpose, you can use a commas in group selector. Then next point, positioning in CSS. The very important point in positioning in CSS, positioning describe how your elements is positioned. In positioning in CSS, positioning describe how your elements are positioning. That means top, bottom, left or right. Our values are used in positioning. There are different types of positioning: static positioning, fixed positioning, relative positioning and absolute positioning. Static positioning, fixed positioning, relative positioning and absolute positioning. In next lecture we can see how positioning are used in CSS. Okay, thank you.